Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of my non-native versus invasive species mini virtual field trip. On Monday, I went and took you guys to a very close location where I discussed the difference between non-native and invasive. And just as a recap, remember that non-native can be something that's not local, but an invasive species is one that's not local and then takes over. So on Monday, I showed you guys the pine trees that are there. They're non-native, but they're not harming anyone. So as a part 2, I wanted to show you guys something that was very, very invasive. So I'm here today with my guests out in the Rio Grande River. I am in beautiful Vinton, Texas right now. Now, unfortunately, the river is a little bit more empty than what we're used to. This whole thing will be filled up with water, but it is just now the tail end of winter, and we haven't quite gotten into our spring release from all the water down from Colorado. So it'll still be probably another month before this thing fills up with water. As of right now, it's the equivalent of beautiful beach sand, so it's quite nice, but there's no water. So I wanted to show you guys this whole thing here. These trees that line the river on both sides of the bank here, these are called salt cedars. And salt cedars are very, very invasive. They are short little tree brush things, and they're very, very prominent all along the western part of the United States. Now let's go ahead and take a look at these. Now the salt cedars are quite dry. As I said, we are just now entering winter. Once spring shows up, once the water starts flowing, these will all come right back to life. With salt cedars, you really have to eliminate them in some kind of total way because the root system actually goes quite far down. You can see the old root systems kind of along in here, and they bury themselves deep within the ground. Okay. If you can burn them, you can use chemicals. Mechanical removal works really, really well. But if you're going to do any of those things, you have to make sure you get the roots as well. Otherwise, next year they come right back. Now, in 2007, what El Paso County did was they went ahead and they introduced a Canadian beetle, which consumes only salt cedar. So we've seen a reduction, or at least a control, of the salt cedar along the Rio Grande. Now, what makes these guys so terrible? Well, they were introduced at first in the late 1800s as a decorative tree. They're quite beautiful, really. Very nice flowers from Asia. Now, what we didn't know at the time is that they earned their name the thirsty tree. They drink an abundance of water. So they really suck up a lot of the water that we get and that we use for the Rio Grande for agriculture. Now, the other thing that makes them terrible, and what earns their name also, salt cedar. Now, not only do they drink a whole lot of water, but they also deposit layers of salt within the ground. So what I did is I pulled up a section. You can kind of see the ground fracturing here. But when you pull it up, what you get a look at, beetles, what you get a look at is this layer of salt. Can you see it? This layer of salt that's kind of permeating through the soil horizons. All this white stuff, if it sparkles nicely, you can see a nice layer of salt. And this runs pretty much all over this region. This embankment here is where the limit of the water is, and then of course we've got this floodplain behind us, and this entire floodplain has salt cedars for as far as can be, and one lone tree. So on top of consuming a lot of water, it also has a very bad problem with salt, and the salt has a couple of different issues all on its own. First of all, the salt limits what can actually be grown here. So the salt cedar tree, as it deposits saline, it actually eliminates a lot of the other native trees. Now, the other thing that it does is it also leaches that salt into the Rio Grande. So we have what should be a freshwater system becoming highly saline. On its own, not good. Now couple that with its exposure to not one but two of our bolsons. So we've got two aquifers on either side of the mountain. Okay. Right now I'm on the west side of the mountain. On the other side, it also the river wraps around. So the Rio Grande actually is exposed to and provides recharge to both aquifers. Now, if that recharge is salty, then the aquifers become salty. Now, El Paso is home to the the largest inland desalination plant in the world, and there's a reason for it: salty water. So one of the other things that makes the salt cedar invasive is the fact that it doesn't support a lot of species. It actually only supports about 6 different little critters, and everybody else just kind of gets pushed out. So you end up with something that kills off native plants, something that turns fresh water into salt water, and then something that actually reduces the amount of living space in the ecosystem. So what you have here is the traditional invasive species. Now, I chose the salt cedar primarily because it's something that is exposed to almost all of the US. We've got a huge amount of salt cedar all along the west, and we have some spots along the east that have it as well. The Colorado and Rio Grande River are inundated with this stuff. Hopefully we can get it under control. Management is key after all, but with an invasive species, if you can keep it down, then you've done your job. So I am signing off as we are getting some cowboys riding up. So I will sign off. I will see you guys next time. Thank you very much. I hope that the invasive species field trip was worth it. I'll see you guys later. Bye.